I used to spend a lot of time playing racing games as a kid, and looking at the way that the genre has evolved throughout the years while my taste did so as well, it's not too surprising why I hardly ever play one anymore unless it's from my childhood. I don't really want to say that we don't get experiences similar to say Crazy Taxi or Lego Racers nowadays at all, because I don't know if I can prove that. As the years went on, like any other branch of digital entertainment, the video game market has also become immensely saturated. Who knows if there is some hidden gem out there that's exactly what I'm looking for, buried deep within the bowels of Steam that was only ever played by 3 people or something. But I do think that I can speak for a lot of popular modern racing games when I say this, whether it's something like Need for Speed with its more arcade approach, punk culture and street racing, or something like Dirt Rally with its immense focus on realistically simulating off-road motorsports. Each of them feels like it's for a certain type of car guy and not really anyone else. I'm not only saying that based on my experiences with these games, but also based on my conversations with people on them and the content around them that I see on the internet. All genres have their extremely devout fans, of course, that hardly ever talk about something else, and their casual audience that finish a couple of their games once every now and then. But almost nowhere else do I see such disinterest from a casual audience as I do for racing games. It feels jarring to see, since I remember racing games being much more mainstream when I was a kid. Everyone talked about Need for Speed, and I know a lot of people that are now nostalgic for titles like Most Wanted 2005 but don't really play any racing games anymore. I think the reason behind this is that our motivations for playing these titles were very basic at the time, as the games themselves also were. We just wanted to choose a fast or cool looking car and hit the road, and there's only so much a racing game franchise can do over 2 decades to keep that pure feeling fresh with each new title. Although these games keep evolving and we get more cars, tracks, modifications, customizations and so on, these changes can only draw in an audience that keep an eye on these finer details rather than us filthy casuals, as the experience of racing itself is naturally not as novel anymore, and the craving for that experience can be easily satiated by some cheap mobile game or any modern game with acceptable driving mechanics and an active community. This leaves only the hardcore racing and car enthusiasts to play actual racing games for the added details and realism that I mentioned nowadays. If you're into motorsports or car culture in general, chances are you still play or at least follow some racing game franchises very closely, but if you're not, then it's not too surprising that you don't feel as excited about there being hundreds of cars and car parts in the game, since you're just gonna buy the cool one with the big numbers and race with it until you get the next cool one with the big numbers and do the same again until you get bored, rather than grinding to get your dream car lineup and tuning and customizing each one to your ideal anthropomorphic car waifu that you have wet dreams about each night. I really don't have the interest or the $100,000 cockpit for experiencing realistic G-forces as I turn corners in iRacing, and I'm not really interested in the whole true to real life experience of luxurious car ownership in Test Drive Unlimited either. But I do like racing every now and then. Car go fast, car pass other car finish first, I get dopamine. Yippee! I am exaggerating a bit, of course. I do like having to take more things into account than if car is fast or not, like traction and stuff. I am willing enough to play something more involved than Asphalt 11 or whatever number they're on now, which is why the last racing game I had a blast with was actually Gran Turismo 5 10 years ago, and it was when I recently tried out Need for Speed Heat after not touching a racing game for years and got bored after 10 hours that I realized why I love GT5 so much. It wasn't that there was a huge car list, an involved modification system or various customization options, but just that there was so much to do, from all kinds of license challenges and go-kart to rally and NASCAR all in one career mode. And fucking Nürburgring should also be counted as a whole experience by itself. For someone like me that was not a huge follower of any of these things in specific, what made the game endlessly fun was the ability to mix and match all the different tracks and cars that were made for all of these different activities. One of my most memorable experiences was during my first session with the game, when I knew absolutely nothing about what type of car was for what type of track and picked a 1970 Ford Mustang for the snowiest fucking rally track in the game, and it got so confused as to what it should do that it threw a bunch of other 1970 Ford Mustangs next to me as opponents. Whether it was goofing around with these unnatural combinations or playing the game the way it was supposed to, I felt like there was always something new to experience. I mean, even the standard A-spec specific activities in the game were categorized into things like muscle car races, 80s Japanese car races, Lamborghini exclusive races, and so on. And I haven't played Gran Turismo 6, but apparently you could even drive on the fucking moon with a rover in that game. It was so fun exploring every single part of GT5 that it actually made me interested in cars and all of these different types of motorsports during my time playing it, rather than having that interest as a prerequisite for enjoying the game in the first place. It's made me learn about Jeff Gordon and Sebastian Loeb and shit, and almost made me sexually attracted to an inanimate object. Like seriously, how can a car be this goddamn pretty? I don't even need to anthropomorphize this to have wet dreams about it. Son, wait, don't put your dick in the McLaren MP412C. You can't stop me, Dad, I'm going to fuck this car. Now you're all probably thinking, well, are you fucking dumb? Play another Gran Turismo instead of Need for Speed then if you're into that kind of shit. Go try Forza or something. You made it sound at the beginning like there isn't anything out there for you. And you're absolutely right, but this whole introduction was actually to reflect in detail what sort of things can draw a person to racing games without any prior interest in car culture or motorsports based on my own experience, rather than trying to bring down the current landscape of the genre by making a point about it getting too stale or homogeneous. Sure, I am aware of some recent headaches for racing game fans, like the constant delays of Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown and the horrendous microtransactions of GT7, but I don't really see myself as experienced or knowledgeable enough with most recent racing games to make such a general criticism about the genre as a whole, and that's not the point of the video anyway. The point is not to judge what's already here, but to look at what's absent, and that's where RC cars come in. Unlike all the games where you drove actual real-ass cars, RC car racing games have never been very popular even at their best. The most acclaimed, pun intended, game among these was probably 1999's Revolt, and most of you out there might have not even heard of it before. Nevertheless, it has successfully cultivated a cult following over the years and still has an active community to this day, who have even developed a free open source cross-platform port of the game with a bunch of extra content and mod support called RVGL. Absolute fucking mad lads here. It's a shame that I didn't discover this before randomly coming across the $5 Steam release of the original game, buying it without a second thought and 100%ing it in 10 hours, but whatever. This little trip down memory lane was actually the catalyst for this whole video, as I realized quickly that there was something else beyond the nostalgia I had for the game that left me fascinated after I finished it, and it was about the core concept rather than the execution. Not that the latter is subpar by any means, but it does show its age. And to double check this conclusion, I switched to another game from my childhood that also had the same core concept but a wildly different execution. Another RC car racing game called RC Cars, which is a brilliant name honestly, and is definitely not going to cause any hardships for me in separating the specific game called RC Cars from the general concept of RC cars at all while writing the rest of this script. I should change my channel name to YouTube videos in fact. I'm sure that'll make me reach 10 million subscribers instantly. Fun fact, this game is actually the PC version of a PS2 game called Smash Cars, and there are some wild differences between the two as far as I can tell, but if the game seems familiar even though you have never heard of it before, it might be because you played Smash Cars before, so I figured I should point that out. But don't be mistaken, as no version of this game is nearly as popular or beloved as Revolt. However, I personally enjoy it more and have actually replayed it a few times throughout the years, while I hadn't touched Revolt for like 18 years until this month. Both of these games have their own fair share of strengths over the other though. For instance, Revolt's unlock system for new tracks, vehicles and game modes makes use of all of its challenges, from the stunt arena and quick races to the time trials and championships, rewarding the player each time for successfully completing something new. In contrast, RC Cars' unlocks are solely dependent on the championship mode, as you unlock new tracks and collect the money you need to buy cars and car parts only by completing championship races. The overall amount and variety of content there is in each game is also on Revolt's favor, even though RC Cars' singular championship mode is more involved than any individual game mode of Revolt, including its own championships. I do however enjoy how RC Cars plays more once you're actually on the track. The track variety is better and they strike a great balance between an on-road and off-road feel with equal portions of rough geometry and smooth surfaces. The shortcuts feel much more natural and require not only a keen eye but also perfect driving, as messing up could send you all the way back to the previous checkpoint due to the most brutal stage hazards usually being placed right beside these shortcuts or under them. The cars generally feel much better to control and I like their edgier and more detailed designs compared to the innocent look of the Revolt cars, which practically scream into your face that they are toys. But I'm not going to delve further into analyzing these games to every single detail, as what excites me more than playing them is imagining some of their best aspects improved upon with modern tech and combined into a much more breathtaking experience that could bring a fresh and unique experience to the racing game scene. And that's because while GT5 kept me playing for hours and hours without breaks back in the day by presenting me a plethora of different racing scenarios, there are still some scenarios that can't realistically be explored with actual cars, but they can be explored with RC cars. This is why it makes me somewhat more cynical than I would like to be against the gameplay trailers of Nano Racing, for instance, an upcoming Unreal Engine 5 game. It's promising that someone is at least experimenting with the idea of tiny vehicles nowadays still, but the footage I see when I look at these trailers can't help but make me feel that it's the most mundane and unimaginative approach that one could take with the concept. Because simply making the cars small and everything else big by itself should just be a fundamental stepping stone for exploring something much more exciting rather than the end result. The cars don't look like toys and rather look like shrunk down regular cars, and the speed indicator suggests that that's not even the case and rather that the world has enlarged significantly. You cross actual roads, but there's no incoming traffic to dodge, and the streets are completely empty as well. The playground is just there as scenery, as the route doesn't even utilize the fact that cars this small can use these slides as ramps, for instance, as far as I can tell. The house stage is no different, as there is just an actual road set up around the house for you to follow, and the house itself feels like it's just for the view rather than enhancing the track itself. Don't get me wrong, Revolt and RC Cars are both games that have such similarly empty tracks, as the technology and or budget at the time for them probably didn't allow for these games to have too much going on at the same time, but both of them I think are still better at exploring the wilder scenarios you can get your tiny car into. The reason we drive in video games after all, when we could just hop inside our real car and drive that around instead, besides the obvious one that it's infinitely cheaper to do so, is that we can experience scenarios that we wouldn't ever experience in real life. While a lot of people are into F1, almost none of them will ever actually drive an F1 car. The same could be said for NASCAR and rally fans as well, and even beyond the realm of racing, you have all the reckless driving and crazy stunts you could do in open world games and such that would 100% kill you and or wreck your car in real life. The reason that, despite the fact that I had a couple of cheap RC cars as a kid but rarely played with them instead of playing these two games, was a similar one as well. The cars I had ran on a couple of AA batteries and were pretty underwhelming in terms of looks, speed, the actual range from which I could drive them, and everything else you can think of. But when I played RC cars, for instance, they had gas engines that burst out smoke as I boosted beyond like 50 km an hour, and the camera zoomed out from my car, giving it this great sense of speed. And that was only until I got run over by an actual car, reminding me of my place. These moments, for example, are not only cool to see, but they can only be experienced in a game like this. You're driving your fully upgraded Tornado buggy on this smooth asphalt road with one finger on the boost, never letting go, feeling like you're a total beast, when all of a sudden an actual car zooms past you to remind you that 50 km an hour is nothing in their world. And it's not even a race car or anything, it's just a regular truck. There are also all the humans and dogs walking around in these tracks that you can run into for points, and they try to kick you around for annoying or hurting them. So the cars next to them feel like unconquerable beasts that cannot be hurt, and if you get hurt by them, it's only because you get in their way yourself. Like they're on a totally different league of their own. They're not even acknowledging you. You're a goddamn toy. Know your place. On the other hand, if I got an RC car in real life now, the scenarios I see in these Nano Racing trailers would be the exact ones I would set up for my car day one. I would just drive it inside my house and backyard, and then maybe on the streets a little when they aren't too busy, or on an empty parking lot or something. And I'm not even touching on the fact that the price gap between a video game and an RC car is far smaller than the price gap between a a video game and an actual car. You know what sort of scenarios that my RC car probably wouldn't be in though? Racing in a museum with all sorts of fragile rare materials around after its closing hours, or on a ship during a thunderstorm, or on fragile scaffolding above a goddamn cliff full of signs that it could collapse at any moment like holes and displaced planks and stuff, or on an actual active war zone. You know, the kind of things that would get me arrested or cost me my expensive toy. Furthermore, one aspect I haven't actually talked about concerning Revolt specifically is that it has weapons like in Mario Kart games and such, and they are very in line with the theme of toy cars, having firecrackers as homing missiles and throwable water balloons. It sells further the idea of controlling actual RC cars and ends up making the game feel so much more joyful than just driving regular cars that are shrunk down. Look, I'm not saying all of this to shit on a game that isn't even out yet. The developers of Nano Racing already seem to be meeting some skepticism and criticisms under their trailers, and they keep assuring people that the game is still in very early development and that they are listening to feedback and moving according to it. One of the last things I would want to do is to bash small independent studios working on their passion projects or wishing for these projects to fail, especially when I'm just sitting here talking about video games rather than taking an active part in the arduous journey of creating them, so who am I to judge their efforts? But I thought that I should highlight my own worries about Nano Racing here to hopefully give some constructive feedback to its developers or any other developer out there working on a new RC car racing game if they by any chance come across this video, because I think that it's things like these that can make their game stand out and make it gather the following it deserves. As I've said at the beginning of the video, there are so many video games out there now that come out each day. It unfortunately makes the competition brutal for new developers trying to get their games noticed, and I worry that games like Nano Racing may lose that competition if small cars in big world end up being all they offer that is different from a typical racing game. But if they spice it up with something new around each corner by being imaginative with all the different things that could be done with RC cars, just as GT5 offered so much of so many different things to do with actual cars, it could end up being something really special, I think. First off, combining the relatively more extensive car list of Revolt with the simple yet effective car upgrading system of RC cars and then expanding both even further is a must-have, I think, as well as making the total number of tracks more than 10 of course. Obviously the year is 2023 and no one would be happy with seeing arguably the most dated aspects of these two games in a modern title. I'm pretty sure that no one would really want 3 cars in total with only 9 upgrades for each, or 25 cars with static stats if you ask me. And the variety is of course the key here. You can have both electric and gas cars in the game, you can have some of them be better for off-roading and others for on-road races, you can have cars with gimmicks like Revolt's rotor that can keep driving upside down, so on and so forth. And once we get the vehicles down, we spice up the rest of the game with tons of unique tracks that can really make these small toy cars shine for being small toy cars. If you recall what I've said moments ago about how much I love witnessing this difference in league between my little toy car and an actual car for instance, you can easily imagine that I would lose my mind if a game allowed me to experience the same on roads with much busier traffic, and even the sidewalks being filled with many more people that you have to dodge. Or think about racing to the top of a giant building that's under construction, driving through large empty rooms one moment and the next you're carefully balancing your car on narrow scaffoldings, knowing full well that making a wrong turn or going too fast to catch up to your opponent could end up in disaster. Or let's say a giant factory stage with conveyor belts that can slow you down or increase your speed, or a stage with caverns that could be wide or narrow, the terrain inside being riddled with tiny stalagmites that could pop your tires and large ones you could crash into if you're not careful, or being slippery enough to send you to your doom at too much of a wide turn. Fuck it, let there be a zoo track with a bunch of different animals where you can fall into the bear closure from the catwalk to get mauled, or into the electric eel tank or something. There could be a track for any building or enclosure you would normally not be racing an RC car in. An airport, a power plant, air vents, a hospital, a fucking submarine. You can even spice things up further than just racing with gimmicks like the weapons in Revolt that can even be state specific. Imagine racing in a goddamn laser tag arena and every car has glowing neon stripes and shit and is equipped with lasers, and when your opponent is hit by your laser their car gets jammed for a couple of seconds. Fucking laser tag and RC car racing combined. There could be an ancient temple level laced with booby traps and you have to keep a keen eye for the pressure plates and such, or a museum or bank heist themed one where your cars are equipped with spy gadgets gadgets like grappling hooks and shit that have limited uses maybe, so it doesn't just turn into Spider-Man racing. Don't get me wrong, you can and should still have your intro level normie cars and tracks too, like a house or the suburbs with not much going on, to provide a simple entry point for the player so that they don't get overwhelmed when figuring out the game for the first time or get bombarded constantly with new gimmicks throughout their entire playtime. It's also important to strike a balance at the end of the day. Now look, I know I'm throwing all these ideas that come into my mind out there without limiting myself within the boundaries of reason in any way whatsoever. I know that expecting something this ambitious from such small developers that are just trying to make their first game ever, as far as I can tell, is unreasonable as fuck. But my goal was more letting my imagination run wild and describing my ideal RC car racing game more than telling everyone exactly what to do for their own game. I just thought that it might help everyone else brainstorm a bit and come up with their own unique ideas too that could be worth the effort of implementing, because at the end of the day, as much as I hate to crush anyone's dreams, I think that if this ends up being all that Nano Racing offers at release, it will only guarantee its demise as one of those games that 3 people play on Steam when it comes out for like 10 minutes and then it's never talked about again. Because as far as I can tell from the gameplay trailers, all that this game has over these two that have both come out more than 2 decades ago is ultra realistic graphics. And credit where credit's due, they really do look fantastic, but I don't know how much that can do for the game by itself. It seems to be a major selling point from what I can tell by looking at the Steam page, but after all it's 2023 and Unreal Engine 5 is free. Everyone has fancy graphics and is used to seeing them now, and even back in the day when game graphics were the talk of the town, it wasn't GT5's graphics that kept me playing, but the fact that there was so much to do and all of it was fun. I still thought it looked gorgeous for the time and was wildly impressed by it, but that wasn't what kept me coming back in the slightest. So yeah, I hope I was able to state why I think a modern RC car racing game could be quite impactful and the pitfalls that anyone aiming to develop such a title should avoid without discouraging anyone. I'm sorry for going so hard on Renault Racing specifically throughout the whole video, but I thought that criticizing what I see in this footage could help me make the point I was trying to make, and it was kind of the only game of note that was similar to a modern RC car racing game that I came across while making this video. Like I said, this game is still in development and the footage that I showed here was from a year ago, so it's quite possible that it's going to look a lot different and hopefully more exciting when it comes out. I really do hope that the project isn't abandoned and that the developers can make me eat all my words by coming out with something that blows everyone's minds. But until that happens or anyone else takes it upon themselves to fulfill my dreams, you can get yourselves Revolt and RC cars for like $5 each on Steam and have a pretty fun combined 15 hours or so of playtime from them if you wish. In fact, I suggest you don't make my mistake with Revolt and get RVGL instead if you're interested in the game, since it's free and has more than the base game with the added bonus of better modding and multiplayer as well from what I've heard. And in the case of RC cars, if you do get it on Steam, while I can't speak for Windows 11, Linux or Mac, you should be able to get it running on Windows 10 or below without an issue. However, it's going to be running extremely slow once you do so. What you need to do to fix this is go to options and then click on advanced video, from which you can limit the FPS cap to 60 and the game will run as smooth as butter without any issues after that. Now one last thing I want to add before I end this video is that I don't just want RC car racing to make a comeback in video games but in other media as well. I swear to God, no matter what sort of anime we get, it's like we always need a high school setting. If that's the case, then I'd say that RC car racing would be a perfect fit, since you can have your epic rivalries and tournament arcs and all that good stuff while also having your high school romances or whatever you want to have, because you know, you can't really do that with high schoolers driving actual cars. Well, unless you want to make them criminals, I guess. I do know that there are animes with RC cars in them. I even watched some episodes of one called Flash and Dash as a kid, but I have never seen one get that popular, even though it seems like such a perfect formula. You may say that it's because RC cars are a niche hobby and not something everyone can care about, like say music or cooking, but we did see an ice skating anime of all things become the talk of the town before as well, so I don't see why the same can't happen with RC cars if you write a good story and introduce good characters to go along with it. It's not like they will constantly be talking about the most over technical aspects of how an RC car works or something during every moment that the racing scenes take place. It will probably be a lot of screaming and nannies as they all try to overtake each other during the most over dramatic depiction possible of what's actually happening. You know, anime. Anyway, Anyways, with all of that being said, that's pretty much it for this video. I know it was mostly random anecdotes and spitballing ideas over things that I feel nostalgic for, but it's not like I ever promised that this would be a super professional, well-structured video essay or something. I have 76 subscribers, for crying out loud. But speaking of that, why not consider adding to that number yourself if you enjoyed this video, as it would help me a ton in reaching my goal of 100 subs by the end of the year. But even if you don't want to, I hope to see you in the next video nonetheless. Take care of yourselves until then, and thank you for watching.